So ladies and gentlemen, finally, please welcome Hari on stage and give him a huge round of applause. Thank you so much for being patient with me.
Thank you. I never had my Wikipedia entry read before I went up.
I use ChatGPT by the way.
No, I appreciate it. People should know how great I am. I'm Hari Kondabolu. I am a stand-up comedian and a filmmaker. Perhaps some of you have heard of my work, The Problem with Apu, which is a documentary that I made a few years ago that focuses on the stereotypical character Apu on The Simpsons and what it felt like as a young South Asian American who was not represented in the mainstream media really other than a stereotypical character that was voiced by a white guy and represented everyone in our very complex community. And so that's what the film is about. People who saw the film liked it. People who didn't see the film generally hated it, because that's how the internet works. But that was kind of the climate. There was the climate that was there in American media when I moved to Seattle in 2005 was one where we did not count. We were not seen. Our image did not matter. We were a prop for other people's jokes, but the complexity of our identities was not present. I was an immigrant rights organizer in Seattle, did stand-up at night, and Rita and Farah, who founded Tasveer, reached out to me about doing a fundraiser, because I had started doing stand-up comedy in Seattle, and they wanted me to host their fundraiser in 2005. And I said yes, even though it was 2005 and I was not very good, but they were not paying me, so they got what they paid for. And despite that, the festival was still a success. And they invited me to go to the festival, and I saw incredible films from all over South Asia. But the film that resonated with me the most was a film called Punching at the Sun. Some of you might know this. It's a film by Tanuj Chopra, and it's the story of South Asian American kids growing up in Jackson Heights in Queens in the years after 9/11, right? During a period of increased hate violence, during a period of deportations and detentions and FBI targeting and many other things that some of you have read about or lived through, right? And I watched this film in Seattle about Queens, about Jackson Heights, where I grew up early in my life, and was amazed because for the first time ever, I saw myself on the screen. I literally saw, like, no one had ever captured what it was like to be a kid growing up in Queens. Because it was not a sanitized version. It was very, like, honest and blunt, and the colors of Queens were in full effect. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was unbelievable. And then after the event, there was a little, I guess it was kind of like a Q&A with students from, I think, Seattle, Bellevue, and Kirkland who were South Asian, who had seen the film and were discussing what they had saw, and which was incredible to see, young people from one part of the country connecting with their South Asian peers from another part of the country, and they loved the film. But I remember them saying, "I really, really loved it, but why do they curse so much?" And the fact that they caught that, and it was so different from here, reminded me, oh, he really nailed the story of Queens. Because that's what we cursed a ton. It was never neat. It was never clean. It was dirty city living, and the fact it captured that was so incredibly inspiring. So I ended up making a documentary. It was a mockumentary, a short film about 12 minutes long called Manoj, and Rita and Farah played it in the festival a few years later. So I've had a connection with this festival for quite some time, and I remember what the atmosphere of the country was like politically and also in terms of media when I was at that festival. Now, fast forward to last week. I got invited to an event in Los Angeles. It was a South Asian excellence event for the Oscars. And it was incredible to be at. There was about 200 people there, and Priyanka Chopra was there, and Malala was there, which was surreal, and Asif Mandvi was there, and Tan France, and so many incredible South Asian people. And luckily, the community is small enough where I somehow made the list. I mean, I made the top 200. That's good. So, but I was watching this in kind of a disbelief that, like, this was not 200 South Asians who were making art or in media at the same time, in a room together, sharing their stories, sharing how disappointed their parents have been, commiserating with each other. And it was such a beautiful thing, and I saw that and I was amazed. And I know Tasveer was part of the reason that we are where we are right now. Now, I suppose the question is, why are festivals that, like, Tasveer puts on, still important in an era where there is so much more representation, where you can see us on television, right? Where you can see us in film. The reason, first of all, is that Tasveer helped make that happen and continues to contribute to that, one. Two, what we generally see in the mainstream media is certain depictions of South Asians. It's Indian focused generally. It's mostly men. It's mostly cis, straight men. That's like, it's basically me, right? So that's like the majority of our representation. And of course, there's Mindy Kaling and there's like some South Asian female stories, certainly, but there is a large community that is not represented. The LGBTQ community is not necessarily represented in the media, in the mainstream. We don't see the broad range of stories from refugees and migrants, and that is something that Tasveer has always brought. They have brought us a broad range of stories from around the world and within this country. I'm sure you've all been asked at some point, particularly in Seattle, what are you? It's a really kind of a crude question. It's like it's basically saying, why are you brown? Why are you here, right? Where are you from? It's like one of those questions. What are you? And the thing is, what we are is not a simple answer. And this festival gives us the complicated answer we deserve, right? The multi-layer, complex identity that being South Asian means. As much as Triple R was an incredible achievement in terms of its reach, as a Telugu, it was cool to hear Telugu being spoken and people actually knowing what that meant to be Telugu, even though it was dubbed in Hindi on Netflix, but whatever. I get it, we're from the South, I get it. But it wasn't an independent film. That was a multi-million-dollar film. It was a Tollywood film that broke through. What about the films made by people with less money, with less funds, whose stories are just as important, who don't have that kind of funding? I mean, that's where Tasveer comes in. That's where festivals like Tasveer's South Asian Festival come in, because that's the exposure that these films need to get buyers. It is pivotal. We need to support our art. I mean, South Asians are 1/4 of the human population. I think we deserve a little bit more representation, with all things considered.
Yes, please.
And, you know, it's great to see Netflix and see all these streamers and see South Asian stories, but a little bit of reality, and this might be cynical, but I think about the time where there were like 4 channels, 5 channels that you could watch in this country, right? And then cable comes along, it becomes more affordable, and there's more channels. And a lot of those programs, I remember, did not include us. A lot of those films didn't include us, because the idea was you're trying to get the biggest piece of the pie. What does mainstream America want? It doesn't want brown faces. It doesn't want our stories. We are not relevant. We don't know who they are, right? So we weren't represented, really, other than in characters like Apu and things like that as props. Things start to change. The internet kind of democratizes media. People start to see that we have drawing power, that we have eyes, that we are willing to see and support our community. And also, media changes. You have all these streaming platforms. There's so many more places for content, right? So all of a sudden, it's like the gold rush for creators like myself, who all of a sudden are getting things sold because people want our stories finally, right? They want to invest in these stories that were not heard before. And so all of a sudden you see all this movement and all these programs, and it's an exciting time. Well, if you're paying attention to the entertainment news right now, there have been a lot of mergers. And there have been a lot of like Discovery buying HBO and things like that. Like all of a sudden, things are shrinking again. The number of media platforms is reducing. People are all of a sudden not just throwing money around, and they want to, they're much more careful about what they're putting forth. So when there's fewer things around, who usually takes the hit? It's usually marginalized communities and our stories. All of a sudden, they're not just worried about our community and what we can do and what we draw. They want the bigger piece again because they're restricted to 3 or 4 places now. It's another reason why I think it's important now more than ever to support our art, to support the art that we are all making, because again, we have to show that the art that we're making is monetizable to them, that it is legitimate, that people want to see it across the board from different countries. It is dependent on us to support organizations who put that art forth and support that art. Tasveer has been working with streamers. You can see some of the films on the festival on Alaska Airlines. Like, they've made a big point of trying to get the work outside of just the screens here in Seattle. I know some people might think, well, there's so many service organizations, and why fund an arts organization? And to say that Tasveer is just an arts organization is really misunderstanding the work that they do. First of all, like, in addition to like funding things and having speaker series and a youth program and storytelling and comedy, which is like becoming foundational in our community, they also, like, the films they put out are not just films you would see anywhere. There are, like I was saying before, it's like a broad range of what it means to be South Asian, and representation is political. Art is political. Our existence is political. We exist because filmmakers and artists are willing to tell our stories. So again, like, we owe a great deal both in this community and I think around the country to organizations like Tasveer, who have done that for 21 years now. I think Tasveer is seen as an institution amongst a lot of people. I'm sure certainly a lot of people here. It has been around for quite some time. It's 21 years old. It's allowed to drink now. Like, it's been around for a while. And I think the problem with that is that as wonderful as it is to be an institution, institutions get taken for granted. The assumption is, well, it's always been there, it will always be there, and that is not the case. It takes a great deal of money to keep this thing going and to keep the mission that they have created, that has gotten larger and has gotten wider than it ever has been, to keep that going. And the only way that's possible is with your support. Now, I have a 2.5-year-old child in New York. I don't like leaving home very much unless I absolutely have to. And for me to fly cross-country to do a fundraiser, it's because I believe in the work that is being done here, that I don't see it as just a film festival. And I believe that the work that's being done by this organization will help my child see themselves and know that they are worthy. And that's all I had to say tonight.